We're going over System Pticha, Preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah by Bala Sulam, Chapter 3, the 5 Partzufim, Faces of Ak, Primordial Man. Session 17, Primordial Man, Partzufim, Faces. Observation of Galgalta, Skull.
Observation of Galgalta, Skull. Baal HaSulam, number 27. In the beginning, the first Partzuf phase of Ak, Primordial Man, emerged. This is because immediately following Tzimtzum Aleph, first restriction, when Bechina Dalet, phase 4, was banned from being a receptacle for the upper light and was directed with a masaq, screen, the upper light was drawn to clothe in the Kli, vessel, of Malchut, kingdom, as before. Yet the masaq, screen, in the Kli, vessel, of Malchut, kingdom, halted it and repelled the light. Through the striking in the masaq, screen of Bechina Dalet, phase 4, reflected light up to the level of Keter, crown, in the upper light. And this Or Hoser, reflected light, became a clothing and the roots of the Kalim, vessels, for the 10 Sephirot, emanations in the upper light, called 10 Sephirot Derosh, emanations of the head, of the first Partzuf, phase, of Ak, Primordial Man. Explanation, number 27. After crossing the barrier, the first spiritual phase in the world, collection of phases, of Primordial Man is experienced. Immediately following the barrier, the first restriction, the coarseness, egoism of the individual, phase 4, is disabled from being the direct receptor of reality, upper light, and is intercepted instead by the screen. Then reality, upper light, is attracted to the perception, vessel, of the individual, kingdom, as it was before the barrier. Yet, the screen in the vessel of the individual, kingdom, halted the reactive interpretation of reality, light. Through this striking in the screen of the individual, phase 4, it calculated potential responsibility of causality, reflected light, up to the level of preparation, crown, in reality, upper light, that became a conduit and the roots of the vessel of the 10 receptors, emanations, in reality, upper light, called 10 emanations of the head, of the first phase of Primordial Man.
The first restriction, explanation. Item 27. After crossing the barrier, the first spiritual phase in the world collection of phases of Primordial Man is experienced. Immediately following the barrier, first restriction, the coarseness, egoism of the individual, phase 4, is disabled from being the direct receptor of reality, upper light, and is intercepted instead by the screen. So what we're talking about a situation where the person has built their will to receive, they built their vessel, and they brought it to the point of 4.4. They've felt that elevated state, they've crossed the barrier, and now all the light has dissipated. And this is the state that we're starting with. We're starting with the first restriction. And what we're going to be talking about in this session, we're going to be talking about all the phases from 1.1 to 1.4 after the barrier. And there's 5 spiritual phases, so 5 states a person experiences. And before those states, the person experiences the first restriction. And in between each of those spiritual phases, he also or she also feels the restriction over. So you basically get a restriction, then you get a screen activated with a spiritual phase, then you lose it, and you're back into the restriction, the first restriction again. And then you get your next spiritual phase, you feel great, and then again you lose it and you return to the first restriction, and so forth. You go through that process 5 times. So what we have is we have here, we're going to relate to the phases, how they are built, and the idea is that you've got above the tabur, the navel, which is considered above the ego, and you've got below the tabur navel, which is considered Bechina Dalet, which is phase 4, the egoism. And then you've got the Siyum Raglin, the end of legs, which is basically saying this is where spirituality ends. And then you've got Olam Hazeh, this world, which is what we normally call reality. This is the physical perception of reality. That means what our senses see, and that is considered physical. So the idea is we have physicality, which is where the spiritual face ends, right, which is called the end of legs, and everything above the end of legs is considered spiritual.
All this is included in phase 4, right?
Oh, the whole thing, yes. So the idea is that when we're talking about here phase 4 egoism, we're talking about phase 4 within phase 4. So we're talking about inside the individual, there are the phases within the individual. And there's the root phase, the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, which are considered above the tabor of the navel. And then we have the phase 4 of phase 4, which is the phase 4 of the individual, and that's considered the egoism of the individual. And that is below the tabor of the navel. So basically what we have is we have above the tabor navel is what we call the relationships to reality. It's what I think, through the various phases, what I think of reality, and that's what we're basically building. We're building different internal structure of able to identify the differences between the different parts of my reality. So the idea is that before a person crosses the barrier, they're inside reality. And it's what we say that the vessel is annulled to the light. And that's why we say in the world of boundless light, of Ein Sof, which is before the barrier, that is a state where the vessel is annulled into the light. That is, the person's perception is annulled into reality. And then after you cross the barrier, then you've suddenly got a separation. You're now looking at life as a game. You're now viewing life from a separational point between you, which is the individual, and reality. And that's exactly where the screen is. The screen is on top of the individual, which is going to be taking causality of the reality that they see. So you're basically moving from being inside the movie to being outside the movie and being the spectator. And that's mostly what you're doing, especially from 1.1 to 1.4 after the barrier, where you're being more of a spectator and sort of identifying and observing. And of course, you're still doing all your corporeal things that you were doing before, but your perception point is different. So even though you're going to the bathroom and you're eating and you're going to work and dealing with your family and going to the spiritual society and going to the group, all that stuff, but you're feeling it from a distant point. And that is considered the first restriction, where you've got that distant point.
Could you explain a little more about this world below end of legs?
So this world below end of legs, this is considered what we see with our senses. So the way it works is there's two ways we get input from reality. We either get it from what I think of reality or how reality makes me feel. And so think of it as sort of two entry points. There's what I think about reality, and that's considered above the egoism of the person. It's like what I think of the world. So I'm basically thinking mostly of the world, and I'm not thinking about me. And then you've got the reception, right? So the first is like bestow, it's like what you're thinking of others. Then you've got the reception is how the reality makes me feel. And the way that comes in is from below upwards. So you've got from above downwards is what I think of reality. And then you've got below upwards is what reality makes me feel. And that is felt in the B'chinadal, the phase 4 egoism, which when you cross the barrier, you're sort of putting that on the side. You're restricting it. You're saying, I'm not going to deal with that right now. What I'm going to deal with is building correct relational structure towards reality. So I'm going to sort of disable my egoism, and I'm going to be focusing less on my desires, and I'm going to be focusing more on what am I seeing in my reality. Now that I've separated myself from that reality, I become a observer instead of getting, before and being stuck in the turmoil of reality.
Sakai.
Yes.
What is the causation of the formation of the masaq, and how does it happen? I mean, I understand that it's our coarseness. When we come across the barrier, we're using the Zimzum to block the light. And then after 3 days, we get our first masaq, the screen. But what causes that to happen? What forms it?
So the screen, the first time we sort of talk about the screen in any sort of manifestation It's called the point in the heart. Right? So we start with the point in the heart, and the point in the heart goes through evolution. We've talked about it in previous sessions, how it goes from the passive point in the heart, which is at 1.3, which is religion. Then you've got 2.3, where it goes to become an active point in the heart. That's after you dealt with the mutual guarantee in the spiritual society, and you're sort of moving into cleaning concepts. And then you've got at 3.3, that's when you sort of feel your pain point of your class. And those are the three prerequisites, stages of the screen. Right? So it goes from a passive point in the heart to an active point in the heart to an intense point in the heart. And then when you cross the barrier, which is the first restriction, that is when you've given birth, basically, to your point in the heart. And that point in the heart is now outside of the will to receive, and therefore it can go on top of the will to receive and become a mediator between the will to receive, which is your perception, and the light, which is reality. And that becomes the screen.
So it's your point in the heart, and its intention becomes your screen.
Exactly. So the matter of the point in the heart is not coarseness, it's hardness. So you've got, in the end, when you cross the barrier, you've now got two qualities. You've got the full vessel of coarseness that you built before the barrier. And now what you're starting to do, you're starting to slowly build your hardness. And that's what you're building until the end of correction. So when you reach in the end of correction, now you've got a full vessel of coarseness with a full vessel of hardness. And then after end of correction, you're dealing with the working with both those concepts together.
Okay. And as we go through these phases after the barrier 1.1 through 1.4, then what happens is that each time you create the new masaq and a vessel, then you're separating different aspects of your ego from yourself, from your reality.
So we're talking about being above the ego. We're talking about above the Bechina Daled, above the phase 4. The ego is within the individual, which means above the top or the navel. We're dealing with breaking up different relationship feelings towards the different parts of reality. Towards preparation, which is the still, vegetative, and animal, towards the humanity, spiritual society, the group, and yourself, which is the individual. So the individual that you're working with is considered the individual above the tabor of the navel, which is included within the group. So the idea is that normally an individual that you're working with is a subpart of the group, and that's one of the reasons why 1.3 and 1.4 are very intertwined, and Man Bon, you'll see in Bala Sulam, he sort of combines them together since they're sort of they're integrated together.
Thank you.
So we'll move on. Observation of Galgalta skull. Then reality, upper light, is attracted to the perception vessel of the individual kingdom, as it was before the barrier. Yet the screen in the vessel of the individual kingdom halted the reactive interpretation of reality, light. Through this striking in the screen of the individual, phase 4, it calculated potential responsibility of causality, reflected light, up to the level of preparation, crown, in reality, upper light. That became a conduit and the roots of the vessels for the 10 receptors, emanations in reality, upper light, called 10 emanations of the head of the first face of primordial man. So what we're dealing with now is every spiritual face is built from two parts, or mainly two parts. You've got the head, which is the calculation, and you've got the body. And the difference between the head and the body, first of all, when you're going through the phases after the barrier, you only feel the body, and you don't feel the head. But you know that there was an observation beforehand, there was a calculation. It's like, for example, when you walk into a house, you know that there was someone who built the house. Yes, you're not attaining who built the house, but you know that someone built the house. You know it's not just you're walking into somewhere and nothing was ever built there. So the idea is that every time you're feeling a sensation, you know that there was this calculation that would decide how much causality can I take over reality and how much can I not. And that calculation is done in the head. But what you feel is the body. And that body is divided into two parts. You feel the inner and the end. The inner is what you were able to take causality over, and the end is the feeling of what you were not able to take causality over. Right? And in this head, this Rosh, so we're in the first Partzuf face of Galgalta, which is in English skull. in the head, you've got two parts. You've got Or Yashar, which is the direct light, and you've got the Or Choser, which is the reflected light. And we talked about it, that the direct light hits the screen, so this is the screen, and then what it does is that the part that I can take causality over is sort of bounce back and becomes the reflected light. And the part that I can't take causality over, in the end, becomes the surrounding light. And we'll be dealing with that in future sessions. So the idea is that reality, which is the light, comes into my screen. And instead of immediately receiving reality as it is and just taking it on face value, I have a screen that says, no, let me see, let me be not reactive. That means I'm not just receiving reality as it is. Let me be active. Let me stop this. I'm going to push back and say, no, let's see what we have here. I'm going to be observational. I'm not just going to receive reality as it is, but I'm going to observe it from above. And that's the whole concept of reflected light, where I'm doing that pushback and saying, I'm going to take causality. And that sort of, if a person is in a shell, for example, that's when the screen is broken. It means that they're not observing reality, rather they're just taking reality as it is. Something goes wrong, they feel it immediately. Someone tells them off, they get hurt. And they don't have that observational perspective. And if you have your screen active, that's when you have that observational perspective.
So the reflective light is the light aspects of the direct light that we decide to bring within ourselves. This is why it creates our Rosh, and we're calculating with this and what we can use of this with inside our internality.
Exactly.
The rest, it becomes the surrounding light.
Right, like the pushback, even though you were saying, well, I'm pushing it back, so how do I receive it? The idea is that the pushback, that process then gets internalized within the person, and then the person feels the amount that they've sort of reflected on, right? Think of it like I'm reflecting on a situation, right? So even though you're pushing back, you're actually internalizing it afterwards and feeling that observation, you're feeling that reflection on reality and saying, oh, what do we have here? So on one end, it's like a pushback, but on the other hand, that feeling gets internalized into our perception, into the vessel.
Thanks.
Let's move on. Expansion of Galgalta, skull.
Expansion of Galgalta, skull, Balaha Salam. Subsequently, Malkut kingdom with the Or Hoser, reflected light, expanded from her and within her by the force of the 10 Sephirot de Rosh, emanations of the head, into the 10 new Sephirot emanations from above downwards. This completed the Kalim vessels of the Guf body. Then the full measure that emerged in the 10 Sephirot de Rosh emanations of the head, clothed in the 10 Sephirot de Guf emanations of the body as well. This completed the first Partzufim face of Ak, primordial man, Rosh head and Guf body. Explanation. Subsequently, the individual kingdom, with the calculation of causality, reflected light, expanded from the subconscious of the person to their consciousness by the force of the 10 different relationships, emanations of the head into the 10 emanations from above, the individual, downward into the individual. This completed the vessels of the body. Then the full measure that emerged in the 10 emanations of the head, calculation, clothed in the 10 emanations of the body, sensed by the individual as well. This completed the first spiritual face of the world, primordial man, head and body.
Expansion of Galgalta, skull. Explanation. Subsequently, the individual kingdom, with the calculation of causality, reflected light, expanded from the subconscious of the person into their consciousness by the force of the 10 different relationships, emanations of the head, into 10 emanations from above the individual, downwards into the individual. This completed the vessels of the body. Then, the full measure that emerged in the 10 emanations of the head, the calculation, clothed in the 10 emanations of the body, sensed by the individual as well. This completed the first spiritual face of the world primordial man, head and body. All right, so this is basically what we feel when we've crossed the barrier. We normally have like 3 days of feeling that first restriction, and then we start using our egoism that is now included in the screen. We talked about this in previous sessions, that it gets activated, the light reality comes in to the perception pushes that back and says, let's take causality. And it's going to take a very, even though on one hand we say that the first Partzuf, the face of Galgalta skull, has the highest light, the way the reflected light works is because we're growing our screen, we feel a heightened sensation, but there's no details there. And what we're doing, on one hand, the lights are going to be going down. That means we're going to be receiving less of a good feeling, but we're going to actually become smarter. We're going to understand the differences and the distances between it. It's like someone being thrown into a room and being overloaded with all the different stimuli in the room, and then things are taken out of the room. So on one hand, they're receiving less, but they actually become smarter and they actually understand more of the different parts within it. It's like being given a salad, and then slowly the ingredients are being removed, and then you can start to sense, oh, that's what the salad is without tomatoes, and this is how the salad is without cucumbers. This is how the salad is without lettuce, and so forth. And that's what we're going to be feeling as we continue. On one hand, every time we're going to go into a spiritual phase, we're going to feel less and less, but we're going to become smarter and smarter. We're going to be able to have more discernments about the differences between them. And also what this will do will stop building us this ability to not be all the time dependent on the light. That means we don't want to always be dependent on that confidence. And we want to, in between, constantly feel these situations where we don't have that confidence, so that we don't become sort of so dependent on the confidence that we can't live even without the confidence. The idea is that we need to sort of build within us this ability to also get great confidence, but also survive without it. And that's what we've constantly got, this on and off situations of able to take causality and then not able to take causality, but still be independent, whether I'm taking causality or not. Oh, and the idea is that we've got the Rosh, the head, which we said, which is the calculation. We've got the Toch, the inner, which is on the degree of Keter Crown. So we said it's the highest degree, which is basically singularity, but it's a very small feeling of singularity. So you could say, well, what's the difference between singularity after the barrier and then singularity, when I reach the eye is not seen, which is after end of correction? The difference is that this is like a touch of singularity. This is considered the Chida of Nefesh, which means it's singularity, but in relaxation. So it's a feeling of that oneness with the system, but it's on a very low degree. It's on relaxation. It's on that feeling of sort of, okay, life is not bothering me anymore. I'm being above it. I'm able to not really get myself lost into the situations. And that's what relaxation represents. And then you've got the end, which is that feeling of, okay, but I'm above my ego. So I'm not actually dealing with all the issues. I'm not actually, for example, taking actual control over reality. It's more in potential. It's more of, I'm feeling this distance, and that is the control I feel, and not that I'm actually manipulating my reality and manipulating my ego accordingly. And that sensation of that, on one hand, I'm feeling control, but on the other hand, this control isn't real control because it's just a distance from reality and not the integration within reality and still able to control it. And that sensation is felt in the self in the end of this spiritual face.
So when you're in Keter and after the barrier, you're not really going to get a lot of details or anything. You're just going to feel like it's like it says, it's unformed. It's just you get a piece here and there, but it's just really spread out, and you're just not a lot of details to it.
Exactly. It's like, you could say it's like the first time tasting ice cream, where it might be delicious, but you don't have much discernment about it. You don't know the difference between the tastes, and you don't sort of understand what's the differences between the different tastes of ice cream and so forth. It's like it tastes great. You don't know what you're tasting.
Exactly.
So, like that.
But we're talking about tasting our sort of perception, our new tool of perception, and that's kind of what it is, right?
We're tasting our separation from reality, and that's sort of the smallest light a person can feel is considered the light of relaxation. And what that represents is that just feeling above reality, being an observer. And if someone's sort of either in a shell or before the barrier, then they consider that they're annulled into reality. They feel themselves as, not as someone who's observing reality. They don't feel that they're more important than reality. They feel that they're inside reality, and therefore they're just another person in the world, and they have to sort of deal with other people, and who am I? And I need to, deal with all different people that might be more important than me. To able to be the observer of reality, you have to be more important than the entire reality you're looking at. And that's one of the reasons why you have to grow your egoism before the barrier to get to a point where you're like, I'm actually more important than anybody in the world. I am the creator. That's the first point where you can say, you can call yourself, I'm the creator, is after the barrier. Where you're saying, I'm individual, and I'm looking at reality. Therefore, I'm the only one who actually exists. And everything I'm seeing in reality is a manifestation of me. And therefore, I'm more important than anything I'm looking at. Now, just because I'm more important doesn't mean I won't take care of it. I'm more important than my phone, but I'll still take care of my phone because the phone is important to me. But if to able to observe something, you have to be more important than the thing you're observing. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get lost into it. It will swallow you within. And the whole work that we're doing is constantly able to have a huge sense of self, of value, of importance. I'm more important than anything, which is like that separation. But at the same time, able to interact and go deep within and feel the different parts of reality without getting swallowed within that reality. And that is the work that we're constantly trying to do in our advancement. And in this first part, we're just trying to feel that separation, right? Reality is now sort of, it's like I'm zooming out. Instead of feeling myself as an individual within reality, now I'm an individual spectating on reality. I'm now looking at reality, life as a game, and I'm observing it from the side. I'm still not interacting with it. I'm still looking at it from the side. Of course, physically, I'm interacting with it. Everything's fine. But from a perception, I'm looking at it from outside. So it's like I become two pieces. I've got the individual in reality, the character in the game that's doing all the things that it's doing. And then I've got the spectator, the creator within me, that's viewing it from above and saying, oh, what do we have here?
That's the feeling I'm starting to get myself. Is that separation? It's very strange, but it's also very wonderful. And it's just, I don't know. It's just, until you actually pointed it out today, I didn't realize a lot of it. But when you started talking about separation, I feel it more and more, and I realized what it is. It made it clearer in my mind.
And you basically become like two parts. You have a creation within you, and you have the creator within you. The creator within you is now the spectator. That is, it's not actually working as a creator, it's more spectating creator. And your creation is you as a body in this world moving around and doing stuff and having thoughts and emotions and all that. So you've got these two parts within you. And currently your focus is going to be on the spectator point of you as the creator.
That's the separation I'm feeling, is that the separation between my ego and my creator.
All right, let's continue. The face of Ab.
The face of Ab, Baal HaSalam, item 28. Subsequently, that same Zivug Dehaka, mating by striking, repeated itself on the masaq, screen, erected in the Kli, vessel of Malkut, kingdom, which has only Aviyut coarseness of Behina Gimel, phase 3, and then only the level of Hakma, wisdom, Rosh, head, and Guf, body, emerged on it, since the absence of the masaq, screen, and Aviyut coarseness of Behina Dalet phase 4, cause it to have only 4 Kalim vessels: Kahab, Tiferet, course or crown, wisdom, understanding, and beauty. Hence, the Or Hoser, reflected light, has room to clothe only 4 lights: High Noran, Haya expression, Neshama protection, Ruach modulation, Nefesh relaxation, lacking the light of Ikeda, singularity. This is called Ab de Ak, of primordial man. Explanation. Item 28. Subsequently, that same mating by striking repeated itself on the screen erected in the vessel of kingdom, which has only coarseness of phase 3, and then only the level of wisdom, head, and body emerged on it, since the absence of the screen in coarseness of phase 4 caused it to have only 4 vessels: crown, wisdom, understanding, and beauty. Hence, the reflected light has room to clothe only 4 lights: expression, protection, modulation, relaxation, and therefore lacking the light of singularity. This is called Ab, which is the second face of the world of primordial man.
The face of Ab. Explanation. Item 28. Subsequently, that same mating by striking repeated itself on the screen erected in the vessel of kingdom, which has only coarseness of phase 3, and then only the level of wisdom, head and body emerged on it, since the absence of the screen in coarseness of phase 4 caused it to have only 4 vessels: crown, wisdom, understanding, and beauty. Hence, the reflected light has room to clothe only 4 lights: expression, protection, modulation, relaxation, and therefore lacking the light of singularity. This is called Ab, which is the second face of the world of primordial man. So after we feel that sensation of I'm a spectator, what's going to happen is I'm going to lose that feeling, which means I return to the first restriction. So on one hand, I'm still separate from reality, but I'm not feeling that sensation anymore of that power. I lose that power. So it's like I become flat. I'm looking still at reality from outside, but I'm not feeling that sensation of, owning causality. But I'm still outside. That is, once you lose that perspective of that I'm looking at the game of life, that's considered that you're either before the barrier or in the shell. And as long as you have that feeling of that spectator, no matter what you're sensing, that's considered that you're keeping the first restriction intact, which means you have the goal of increasing internal power. Once you lose the goal, that's the quickest way to fall into a shell. So we're dealing now with the Partzuf phase of Ab, which is again called 1.1, and I'll explain in a moment why. And we have the Rosh, the head, which is the calculation. And notice now it's a degree lower. Why? Because, and we'll learn about it in future sessions, the idea is that as we advance, each time we lose a degree of coarseness in our screen, and therefore we can now only clothe up to the degree of the height of Chokhmah, which is wisdom. So in the first one, we were able to extend ourselves all the way to preparation, which is still vegetative and animal, and feeling that oneness, that singularity with our entire reality, with our universe. Then we feel a little less. Now we don't feel oneness with the entire reality. Now we feel sort of that expression on humanity. We now feel above humanity. We're not oneness with the universe. We're now sort of feeling that sensation that in the future we're able to control and manipulate humans in humanity. So it's not I'm one with the system. Now it's a degree lower. Now it's I can control, or now it's potential control of controlling people in humanity, but I'm not with that oneness of the system anymore. So that's considered in the guf, the body of Partzuf, of the face of Ab, it's now considered the height of Chokhmah, wisdom. And also notice that because I don't have that coarseness of phase 4 within my screen, therefore there's no relationship now to the Bechina Dalet, the phase 4, the egoism. I don't feel that sensation of that loss of I'm not using my ego, because I don't have that coarseness of the ego to show that interaction accordingly. Oh, and I was going to say, why is it 1.1? So the idea is that 1.1 is like the unformed state. So to complete the unformed state, you have to feel the sensation of the lights coming in, going out, and then coming in again. And then you've sort of completed that cycle. And then that's considered that you're now ready to move into the next phase, which is 1.2, because now you've got, we always talk about that a 0.2 is like owning that degree. It's like now you have, it's called chaos, but the idea is that you sort of, the reason you're in chaos is because on one end you own your current degree, but you're not moving forward to your next degree. So when you finish that state of the lights, coming in, going out, and then coming in again, that's considered that you completed that unformed state.
Well, each of these different Partzufs represent also like Keter, Hakma, Bina, like that, as it goes down to like Golgotha, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ban.
Exactly. As you can see, Partzuf Golgotha is considered Keter crown, that's the height of it. Partzuf Ab is only up to the height of Chachma, wisdom. When we talked about the mating by striking in previous sessions, so show how, depending on the coarseness within the screen, that can give you a different height of reflected light.
So also as you go through these, then this phase you're going through should have a relationship back to the relationship of that phase. In other words, like Keter will be constructed like Keter, and Hakma like Hakma inside each Partzuf.
What do you mean?
What I mean is that the attributes of each phase, Keter, Hakma, Bina, are attributes of the Partzuf that it represents.
Yeah, it's like the highest sensation of light. So when we
I mean, even beyond just the highness of the light, I mean, it's also attributes of the Partzuf itself. In other words, Keter is unformed. It's like more just scattered. There's no detail to it of any kind.
It's like the root. The Keter is the root. And then you have like which is unformed. And then you have Bina, which is chaotic. And then you have Tiferet, which is darkness. And then you have finally Malchut, which is considered spirit. Definitely.
Right. So these aspects also go back through each Partzuf that they represent.
So when you get your first screen, you're like, wow, amazing, but it's just like a root. You're not really aware of what you're sensing at the time. If somebody else tells you it, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. But if no one told you, you wouldn't be able to really know what you're feeling. And it's a little uncomfortable in that sense. But on the other hand, the sensation is amazing. But when you get into the unformed of Chochmah, then you feel you're unformed. You feel what you don't sense. You feel that sort of, you really have a discernment where you are, you could say.
That's what I was getting to, is because that's the sensations that I'm getting, the changes between the root and to the wisdom or Hakma, and the difference in them.
Which is one of the one of the ideas that we actually get to sense these days. This is not like we're just learning intellectual knowledge and we're just learning about the structure of spirituality. These are phases that you go through, you feel them, you attain them, and that's why we can write about this. We don't talk about things we haven't attained for ourselves.
Yeah, it's totally, I mean, you use the knowledge that you've learned to understand it better, but it's the sensations and the feelings that you're getting that is really the happening, what's going on.
Exactly. It allows you to sort of verify, you could say. They work together. It's like you feel sensation, which is true. And then you have the structure to sort of align yourself. What is that sensation you're feeling? It's like when you go to the doctor, you're saying, I'm feeling pain. And he says, well, do you feel it in your head? And do you feel it in your arm? And he starts touching you. Then you're like, oh yeah, it's over there. So it's not that you didn't feel the sensation before. You just weren't able to correctly know sort of what are you sensing. And that's where the structure really helps to explain what you're feeling. Because someone who reached a higher degree can then look back and understand what they went through before. So then someone who has gone through a high degree can come to someone who's a lower degree and then not always sure what they're experiencing. They can say, well, are you feeling this? Are you feeling that? It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. How did you know? It's like, well, I've went through those phases beforehand. It's like a father or a mother can help their children understand what they're going through. The child themselves is going through those states. Let's say a child is going through puberty. He has no clue why his body's growing the way it's growing. And then the parents can say, well, I went through that. This is what you're experiencing.
There's no surrounding light in the Partzuf above, Zachary?
So there's always surrounding light and inner light. And that's actually what, we'll talk about this in the next session, which talks about how the lights go down. But the inner light, what we're talking about is what we feel in the Partzuf, in the face. So the surrounding light is what's not felt in the face. And we talked about the end is a sensation of not feeling what's inside. Sensation
I
of
see.
what you didn't feel in the surrounding light. And in this body, of course, there's also as well. So the body includes the inner and the end.
In the end of Partzuf also, yes.
Yeah, so the idea is that when we say inner and end, the combination of them is a body. So inside the body, there's also an inner part and there's an end of feeling what you haven't received yet.
Where is it? Is it below the?
So in the body itself, it's not normally drawn in the system where exactly that line is. And that's why I haven't sort of explained it, because there's different opinions where that ending is. But the idea is that you've basically got until phase 3 is considered the inner, and then from phase 3 to phase 4 is considered the end. So always the degree that you're rejecting is the degree that you're going to feel in your end. So if I'm dealing with the coarseness of phase 4, then my end will be phase 4. If I'm dealing with the coarseness of phase 3, my end will be phase 3. If I'm dealing with the coarseness of phase 2, then my end will be phase 2 and so forth.
Yes, and that's what will make the light goes out every time.
Yeah, the
presence of two lights.
Yeah, the beating of surrounding light with inner light, and we're going to be talking about that in chapter 4 of Pticha, which will be in the next session.
Okay.
Let's continue. The face of SAG.
The face of SAG, Baal HaSulam. Following the same Zivug Haka, made by striking, repeat itself on the masaq screen in the Kli vessel of Mahut kingdom that contain on its aviut coarseness of Behina Bet, phase 2. Thus, 10 Sephirah of emanation Rosh head in the group body at the level of Bina, understanding, imagining on it. This is called the Partzuf face, SAG of Ak, primordial man. It lacks the two Kelim vessels, the Zerampin, small face, and Mahut kingdom, and the two lights, Haya, expression, and Yehada, singularity, explanation. Following that same mating by structure repeat itself on the screen in the vessel of the kingdom that contains only coarseness of phase 2. Thus, 10 emanations, head and body at the level of understanding and measurement. This is the called face of SAG of a primordial man. It lacks the two vessels, beauty, small face, and kingdom, and the two lights expression its singularity.
The face of SAG. Explanation. Following that same mating by striking repeated itself on the screen in the vessel of kingdom that contains only coarseness of phase 2. Thus, 10 emanations, head and body, at the level of understanding emerged on it. This is called face SAG of primordial man. It lacks the two vessels, beauty, small face, and kingdom, and the two lights, expression and singularity. So now we've gone down to a third degree of coarseness. So we've gone from phase 4 of coarseness for Partzuf Galgalta, which is skull, the face of skull. We've got the coarseness in the screen of phase 3 for the Partzuf, the face of Ab. And for the Partzuf face now of Sag, which is now called 1.2, this is now a coarseness of phase 2. And therefore the height it can go only up to is Bina, understanding. So because we're dealing with phase 2, we've got the end, which is phase 2, and then we've got above that phase 2, which is root, phase 1 and phase root in phase 1, which is considered the inner, and we're feeling that in the Partzuf of SAG. So we've got a calculation, and we feel that feeling in the inner Partzuf face of SAG 1.2. And this is where we said that now I already have some kind of experience, and after we finish these Partzufim, these faces of 1.1 to 1.4, most of the work that we're going to feel is going to be where this Partzuf of SAG will go down. Afterwards, it's going to go down into the phase 4, into the egoism. So what happens is we're going to sort of branch out into two paths. We've got the path of Adam Kadmon, which is what we're going to continue feeling. And at the same time, we're going to feel that something's happening below us. And that feeling of that something that's happening below us, we will be going through that experience as well when we finished the phases of Adam Kadmon. So it's like two timelines, which it branches out into. So we've got the timeline that we continue on of primordial man, and at the same time, we're going to experience, but from above, the world of Nikudim, which is the world of deficiencies. So we're going to be breaking up into two timelines, and we're going to be experiencing the timeline from above the ego, and then afterwards we'll experience the timeline within the ego.
I read also like that the Partzuf sort of is based off Tzimtzum Aleph, and then Partzuf SAG is based off Tzimtzum Bet. Can you explain a little bit about that?
So we're going to be talking about that more later on at the end of the session. But what I can say now, the idea is that all the faces of primordial man, they're all Tzimtzum Aleph. They're all the first restriction. But the idea is that because we said that the SAG breaks into two timelines, one of the first things that happens in the second timeline, which is when we go into Nukudot SAG, which is the deficiencies of SAG, where it goes beneath the tabor, the navel, down to the siyum reglin, the end of legs, what will happen is that we'll experience the second restriction. So in the first timeline, we're only staying in the first restriction the entire way until 1.4. And then afterwards in 2.1, when we start to experience the second timeline, we go into the second restriction. And because SAG breaks into these two timelines, we'll see afterwards when we will understand why they're called Ab, Sag, Man, Bon, and accordingly, we'll see that difference where the first part, which is above the top of the navel, is going to be the first restriction, and then the part beneath will now be into the second restriction.
Zakai, what's the meaning, the name of Sagi? What's Sagi name?
So that's what we're going to be talking about at the end of the session. We're going to have a nice slide of all the differences and the numerical values and why they call that accordingly.
Okay, thanks.
Let's move on. The face of Ma and Bon.
The face of Ma and Bon, Baha Salam. Afterwards, the Zivug Dahaka, mating by striking, emerged on a masaq screen that has only Abiyut coarseness, Bihina Allah, phase 1. Thus, 10 Sephiro emanations, Rosh, head, and Guf, body, emerged at the level of Tiferet, beauty. Lacking the 3 Kalim vessels, Bina, understanding, Za, small face, and Malhut, kingdom, and the 3 lights, Nashma, protection, Haya, expression, and Yehida, singularity. It has only the lights, Ruach, modulation, and Nefesh, relaxation, dressed in the Kalim, vessels, Keter, crown, and Hakma, wisdom. This is called Partzuf, face, Ma and Bond of Ak, primordial man. Remember the inverse relation between the Kalim vessels and the lights as mentioned in item 24. Explanation. Afterwards, the mating by striking emerged on a face that has only coarseness of phase 1. Thus 10 emanations, head and body, emerged at the level of beauty, lacking the 3 vessels, understanding, beauty, small face, and kingdom. and the three lights, protection, expression, and singularity. It has only the lights, modulation and relaxation, dressed in the vessels, crown, and wisdom. This is called face, ma, and bon of primordial man. Remember the inverse relation between the vessels and the lights as mentioned in item 24.
The face of Ma and Bon. Explanation. Afterward, the mating by striking emerged on a face that has only coarseness of phase 1. Thus 10 emanations, head and body, emerged at the level of beauty, lacking the three vessels, understanding beauty, small face, and kingdom, and the three lights, protection, expression, and singularity. It is only the lights, modulation, and relaxation, dressed in the vessels, crown, and wisdom. This is called face Ma and Bon of primordial man. Remember the inverse relation between the vessels and the lights, as mentioned in item 24. So now we've got a view of all the different Partzufim faces, spiritual faces that we experience after the barrier from 1.1 all the way to 1.4. And what we're dealing with is in this slide is the Partzuf face of Ma, which is 1.3, which again has a Rosh head of calculation, and in the Guf, the body, it's the height of Tiferet beauty. And we have Partzuf, the face of Bon, which is 1.4, which we again have the Rosh, the head of calculation, and in the Guf, the body, we have the height of Malchut kingdom. And the idea of 1.3 and 1.4, 1.3 is when we feel the lack of the ego. We feel that it's very nice that we're observing reality, but we can't actually get anything done as an observer. And that deficiency is felt in 1.3. Then in 1.4, it changes from being a deficiency, which is like a vessel. It becomes a light. It becomes a future. It's like, okay, what I need to do is actually reactivate my ego, right? Which is that phase 4, that egoism. And then that desire pushes you into 2.1, where you're going to now go beneath the taboo of the navel. Now you're going to say, okay, let's start dealing with my egoism. And how can we slowly take control of it to manipulate it and move forward and actually get things done instead of just spectating and observing. Because observing is really nice, but there's only so much you can do with observation. You actually need to go into reality and start, learning to categorize it and discern it and separate it and manipulate it accordingly.
Sky.
Yes.
Is each parsu within the prior one, or is it just they're all separate from each other?
So they're layered on top of each other. So even though here we showed like they're, the idea is to remember that we're not talking about physical space. We're talking about the way a person feels about their perception. And the idea is that every state a person goes through are layered on top of the previous state. All right? So the idea is that when I'm in that state of Partzuf face of Bon 1.4, it's layered on top of Ma, Sag, Ab, and Galganta, which is skull. So it's like every time I advance, I'm revealing a new layer within me that is based on the previous layers. So it's like when I'm born into this world, I get the desire for food. And then I get a new desire for sex. I don't lose the desire for food. Now I have two desires. I've got the desire for food and for sex. And then I get the desire for a family. I don't lose the desire for sex and for food. Now I've got three desires within me. I've got the desire for food, sex, and family. And the same happens when I get the desire for money. I don't need to eat, and I don't need sex, and I don't need a family. Now I've got food, sex, family, and money. And then on top of that adds honor. And then on top of that adds knowledge. And then on top of it adds religion, or anti-religion, which is the same sort of part. Like an atheist is still in the block of religion, but is sort of feeling the backside of it. It's like against religion. When you're for something or against something, it's still considered in that same degree. So if someone, for example, is against football or supporting football, they're still considered in that desire of football. And so as you continue layering these phases within you, you're always mostly focusing on the new one. You still have to maintain the previous ones. Just like when you're focusing on money, you're thinking of money, but you still have to continue eating and taking care of your body and, having relations and having a family and so forth.
So as we go through the different parsus and power down, when we power back up, we'll be layering on top of the previous ones. adding, and we concentrate on the newest one.
Right. So the sensation is from the newest one, but we still have those previous phases within ourselves that we, still have to maintain and keep going.
Well, wouldn't you kind of mingle and blend the different aspects together somewhat to see the relationship between the different Partzufs, or do you just keep them all entirely separated?
No, you would also discern. So the idea is that every time you have a new phase, you don't just, it's not just separate from the previous phases, you've also got the combinations, right? It's like when you have food and money, right? The combination is a restaurant, right? When you have, let's say, family and honor, right? That's when you're proud of your family. Your family represents a sort of like a kingdom. A kingdom is a combination of family and honor, right? So the idea is you can also look at the combinations of those desires.
So the same thing works in the Partzufs. You can see the different combinations of what you could use, like two of them, aspects out of two of them, or three, or one, however you want to do it.
Exactly. So you're always feeling the sensation of the newer Partzuf, but then you can look back and sort of say, oh, I'm feeling less than I was before. What did I feel before? What was that relationship about? That was about preparation. That was about humanity. That was about spiritual society. That was about the group. That was about the individual. And you start to, and especially it's recommended to learn the structure while you're going through it, because it can really enhance your experience accordingly. It's like you can go through this. One of the huge differences that happens before the barrier and after the barrier in this 1.1 to 1.4, before the barrier you have to do so much work, you have to collect discernments, and you have to do a lot of stuff, right? When you suddenly cross the barrier, that desire dissipates. You no longer have a desire to cross the barrier since you already have. And then one of the complaints I normally get from people is like, so now what do I do? It's like, now you just float. It's like crossing the barrier is like going into space. Now you're just propelled just by the actual, movement that you did beforehand. And now it's like, well, what do I do now? It's like, you do nothing. You continue learning instruction stuff, but there's no actual thing you have to do. There's no discernments you have to make to move between the phases. It's sort of automatic. It's you're like on autopilot. And sometimes it can be a little weird, that shift, because before the barrier, you have to really work intensively and collect discernments and think about crossing the barrier and that desire to really become the creator. And then you finally become it and you're like, okay, now what do I do? Well, you just spectate. It's like, what do you mean spectate? But I've got to do something, right? It's like, no, you don't have to do anything. You're just spectating. That's the idea of relaxation. Relax. It's like, what do you mean relax? And it takes some time to get used to that. And then you're becoming active again in 2.1 when you go down into the egoism again.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, let's continue. The 5 faces of primordial man.
The 5 faces of primordial man. Baal Salam. Item 29. Thus we have explained the emergence of the 5 Partzufim faces of Ak, primordial man, called Galgalta skull, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Bon, one below the other. Each inferior lacks the higher Pchina phase of its superior. Thus Partzuf face Ab lacks the light of Yechida, singularity. Partzuf face Sag lacks the light of Chaya, expression, as well, which is its superior Ab has. Partzuf face Ma and Bon lacks the light of Neshama, protection, which its superior Sag has. This is so because it depends on the measure of Aviyut coarseness in the masaq screen on which the Zivug Dehaka, mating by striking, occurs. Item 18. Yet we must understand who and what caused the masaq screen to gradually diminish its Aviyut coarseness, Pchina phase by Pchina phase, until it divided into the 5 levels that exist in these 5 kinds of Zivugim couplings. Explanation. Item 29. Thus we have explained the emergence of the 5 faces of primordial man called skull, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Bon, one below the other. Each inferior lower face lacks the higher phase of its superior. Thus the face Ab lacks the light of singularity. Face Sag lacks the light of expression as well, which its superior face Ab has. Face Ma and Bon lacks protection, which its its superior SAG has. This is so because it depends on the measure of coarseness in the screen on which the mating by striking occurs, item 18. Yet we must understand who and what caused the screen to gradually diminish its coarseness, phase by phase, until it divided into the 5 levels that exist in these 5 kinds of couplings.
5 phases of primordial man. Explanation. Item 29. Thus we have explained the emergence of the 5 phases of primordial man called skull, ab, sag, ma, and bon, one below the other. Each inferior, lower face lacks the higher phase of its superior. Thus the face ab lacks the light of singularity. Face sag lacks the light of expression, as well, which its superior phase ab has. Face ma and bon lacks the light of protection, which its superior sag has. This is so because it depends on the measure of coarseness in the screen on which the mating by striking occurs, item 18. Yet we must understand who and what caused the screen to gradually diminish its coarseness phase by phase until it divided into the 5 levels that exist in these 5 kinds of couplings. So what we have here is a simple table where in the Partzuf, the face of a Galgata skull, 1.1, we have all the lights within it. We have Yechidah singularity, and we said this is talking about on a micro level, so the idea is that all the 5 phases of primordial man, these are all sub-levels of the light of relaxation. So when we're talking about Yechidah of singularity, we're talking about singularity, Yechidah of nefesh, of relaxation. And then we have also chaya expression, neshama protection, ruach modulation, and then nefesh relaxation, because we used the coarseness of phase 4. In the coarseness now of phase 3, which is an ab, 1.1, we lose the light of Yechidah singularity, and now our highest light is chaya expression. And then we have neshama protection, ruach modulation, nefesh relaxation. And then with the coarseness of phase 2, which is sag, 1.2, then we have we've lost the light of Yechidah singularity and the light of chaya expression, and now we only have the lights of neshama protection, ruach modulation, and nefesh relaxation. And then in ma 1.3, we've now lost the lights of Yechidah singularity, chaya expression, and neshama protection, and we're left only with the lights of ruach modulation and the light of nefesh relaxation. And then finally in bon 1.4, we've lost all the lights apart from nefesh relaxation that we have. So you can see slowly as we go down the Partzufim, the sensation is that we're feeling less and less. But even though we're feeling less and less of sensation, we're actually becoming smarter and smarter because we've got all these previous phases that we've gone through. You could say it's a bit like when you're a child, you're feeling amazing, but you're not very smart. And as you're going on, you're actually losing more and more of those sensations, but you're becoming smarter and smarter along the way.
In terms of coarseness, do we handle less and less coarseness?
Yes. So we're activating less and less of our coarseness, of our egoism. But in the process, we're actually increasing our ability to handle our hardness of the screen. So you could say, well, isn't it requiring less of the hardness of the screen if there's less coarseness? Yes, but to be able to do that requires more sensitivity. So think of it, the difference between a scale that can handle kilos and a scale that can handle grams. Yes, on one hand, the scale that's handling grams is handling less weight. That's true. But it has to be more precise because it's dealing with grams. With kilos, I can, lose a few grams here and there. It's totally fine. But when I'm dealing with grams, that's all I have. So I have to be very sensitive to the pressure. I have to be very particular, and my discernments have to be much more sharp than if I'm just handling kilos of coarseness. So actually, on one hand, the lights are going down, but it's because the screen is able to, it's like growing. It's becoming smarter, and it's able to handle more nuances of the lights. So even though the sensations are going down, it's becoming more sensitive to the egoism. The hardness is becoming more and more sensitive and more powerful accordingly. And I always give the example of there's a building site and people are allowed to go in and out and everything's fine. And then they sort of start the company. And then they're like, everybody out, right? That's like the first restriction. And then you're like, only employees allowed in. And then someone who comes in who's not employed is like, can I come in? It's like, no, but I was there yesterday. No, the company is now opened, only employees allowed in. And then you let all the employees in. Then what you do is that you take a subsection and you're only designing it for, let's say, personnel that are in security, right? So then you push everybody out. Again, it's like first restriction again. And then you're allowing people in only if they're employees and they have the security credentials, right? Then you go even a degree inside. You make a subset of managers. And then you're like everybody out. And then you're only allowing people in that sub area, which are employees. They have the security credentials and their managers. And then you do it again for vice presidents. And then you do the same thing again for the CEO. So if someone is a security guard, if he's a security guard at the front of the company, it's easy. Are you an employee or not? That's its only calculation, right? Are you faithful or not? You're faithful, I'm pushing you away. You're not faithful, you come in. And afterwards, if you have a security guard who's deeper into the company, it's like, well, not only are you faithful, an employee, I also need to know, do you have the security credentials, which is like phase 3. And then the security guard who's even more internal, he has to know the difference now. He doesn't need to just know, are you an employee and do you have the security credentials? He needs to know, are you a manager? And then the security guard, even more inside, he has to know, well, not just are you a manager, are you on the list of the VPs? And even like the security guard, even more inside, he has to know, are you the CEO? So on one hand, less people are allowed in, but the security guard has to be more sensitive to know the differences of, there's not just employees, there's degrees within the employees. There's people that have the security credentials. There are people that are managers. There's VPs and there's the CEO of the company. So even though you're receiving less, you have to be smarter about it to be able to differentiate and know the differences.
So even though you're receiving less because your screen is blocking more?
Exactly. And it's
getting more details, right?
And it knows how to block more. It's harder to block. It's harder to know more details and therefore say, I'm not just blocking phase 4. That's easier to identify. I'm also blocking phase 3, but that's a little harder to identify. And in the final thing in Bonn, I'm blocking everything but like the minutest, purest light in that sense. So it requires me to have more detail and more sensitivity with my screen. So it's more an advanced phase of my screen.
Awesome.
Let's move on. So now we're going to sort of go into a small explanation of the numerology of the faces. So this is outside of the Pticha, but I really wanted to talk about it because many times we talk about the different names. We talk about, it's called Ab, SAG, Man, Bon, and why are they named accordingly? So what we have here on the left, we have Galagata skull, right, which we said goes all the way below the tabor until the end of legs. Right? We said that the inner is until the tabor of the navel, but the end is until the end of legs. Then we've got Ab, Sag, Ma, and Bon, or the upper man, upper Bon, which are until the tabor of the navel, until that phase 4. And then what happens with Sag, in the Kudot Sag, which is the deficiencies of Sag, and we'll talk about that in future sessions, it goes beneath the tabor, the navel, and reaches the end of legs. And then we've got the second restriction, where we divide the ego into 2 parts, between the desires of bestowal, which are considered above the parts of the diaphragm, and we've got the desires below the parts of the diaphragm until the end of legs, which is considered the desires of reception. We do a restriction on those desires of reception, and we only deal with smallness, which is dealing with the lower ma. And then, so you can see how there's an upper ma, there's a lower ma. There's an upper bon, there's a lower bon. The lower is beneath the tabor of the navel, and the upper is above the navel. And the idea is that because of this structure, there's the numerology. So we have Ab, which is Chachma, wisdom, we said 1.1. And the numerical value of Ab in Hebrew is 72, because Ayin is 70 in numerology, and Bet is 2 in numerology, and that's 72. And how is this calculation made? Each face is divided into 4 parts, right? Yud K, Vav K. So we've got Yud, which is Chachma, wisdom. We've got Hey, which is Bina, understanding. We've got Vav, which is Tiferet, beauty, and finally the last Hey, which is Malchut, kingdom. And then each of the faces, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey are divided into different expansions. So Yud is in all the places it's spelt Yud, Vav, and Daled, which, it's like you would say Yud. And Yud is 10, Vav is 6 in numerology, and Daled is 4. So this becomes 20. So in each of this, you got 20, which is considered the Yud. Then in the Partzuf of Ab, which is representing Chochmah, wisdom, since it's all, we talked about it, the Ab is only in the first restriction. So therefore, the Yud represents the first restriction, and the Aleph represents the second restriction. So since we're dealing with the first restriction for Ab, therefore we've got Hey, Yud, Vav, Yud, Vav, and Hey, Yud. Since the idea is that all the degrees of this face are covering the first restriction. In SAG, Bina, understanding 1.2, SAG in Hebrew is the letters of Samach, which is the numerical value of 60, and Gimel, which is the numerical value of 3. So together it becomes 63. And this 63 is the combination of Yud, which we said is 20. Then you've got Hey and Yud, where Hey is 5 and Yud is 10. And we've got the last one where Hey is 5 and Yud is 10. But suddenly we've got in the Tiferet of Sag, suddenly we spell it as Vav, Aleph, Vav instead of Vav, Yud, Vav, because now we're doing the second restriction. As you can see, Sag goes beneath the Tabur and is considered the second restriction. But since it's an offshoot of the screen, it's of the Partzuf itself, that is, Sag itself actually only reaches to the Tabur, the navel. But when then the lights dissipate from the spiritual face, then what happens is it becomes into two timelines, as we talked before. So you've got the one timeline continuing to upper Ma, and the second timeline is going beneath the Tabur navel and filling the egoism. So that is represented here by the Vav, Aleph, Vav in the second restriction. And then in the upper Ma, Tiferet Beauty 1.3, that is now, so you've got Ma, you've got the Mem, which is the numerical value of 40, Hey is the numerical value of 5, and we said Yud again is 20, and then because the Ma is considered all in the second restriction, so you're saying, but wait a second, is there an upper Ma? Yeah, but because we've got an upper Ma and a lower Ma, it's actually sort of named over the lower one, and Sag you can see is not. There's not upper Sag and lower Sag, because we said that the Nukudot Sag is a offshoot of Sag, and therefore you've not got the same idea where Sag is broken into the first restriction and the second restriction. Ma and Bon are all in the second restriction, so therefore in Ma, all the places where there would be a Yud are now replaced with an Aleph, which is 1. So then you've got Hey Aleph, which is 5 and 1. You've got Vav Aleph Vav, which is 6, 1 and 6. And then finally Hey and Aleph 5 and 1, and that whole calculation equals 45. And then finally we've got upper Bon, Malchut kingdom. And the idea is that the Bon represents female. So the Malchut is is representing what we normally call the will to receive, the egoism. And the idea is that in that state, it has to receive from a higher face, from a higher Partzuf. And we'll, of course, talk about this in the future. I just wanted to give a sort of a general description of the numerology of the faces. And the idea is that because it doesn't receive from itself, but rather receives from a higher degree, from Tiferet, therefore the letters have no filling, and therefore they're just duplicated. So you've got Hey, Hey, Vav, Vav, Hey, Hey. And then that numerology value is 52, which is Bon, which is Bet is 2, and Nun Sofit is 50. So then you've got 72, 63, 45, and 52. We'll move on to the quote. This is where you can find more information about this whole detailed description of Balas Olam about the numerology of the faces. And I'll read it now to you. The primary difference is whether the Kilim vessels come from Tzimtzum Aleph, first restriction, or from Tzimtzum Bet, second restriction. Fulfilling the Otiyot letters with Yudin indicates that they come primarily from Tzimtzum Aleph, first restriction, and fulfilling the Otiyot letters with Alephin indicates that they come from Tzimtzum Bet, second restriction. Right? So that's sort of the rule. Is it filled with a Yud, then it represents first restriction, and if it fills with an Aleph, then it's second restriction. The second rule is the matter of Havaya, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, fulfilled with Heyin, with a Hey, where we said it's like duplicated the letters, indicates that she lacks the fulfillment but receives from her upper Partzuf face. Hence, she is only double Havaya, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, doubled, for two Havayot, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, are Bon in Gematria numerology. And this is from the table of questions and answers for the meaning of the words from Talmud Esesvirot, part 6, by Bala Sulam. And this is the first question in the table of questions and answers in that part of Talmud Esesvirot, part 6.
What does it mean to double Havaya? What does that mean? What is that supposed to be?
So Havaya in numerology is 26. So if you double it, it's 52. And that's why Bon, its numerology is 52, since all the letters are duplicated.
Can we look at that table again? I want to see where is it where it said like Yud and an Aleph. So here we got Aleph in Sag, right? That works right. So basically, anytime you see, how come in the last one, Bon, there's no Aleph there to kind of represent that second restriction? I guess, because from reading that quote, it said Yud is Tzimtzum Aleph, and then Aleph is Tzimtzum Bet, right?
Right.
But the last one, Bon, doesn't really kind of follow that rule there.
So the idea is that we said because the face itself of Sag is considered above the tabor of the navel, right? And only the Nukudot Sag, the expansion, is considered below. So what it's showing is that only part of Sag is going beneath the second restriction, while the idea is that the Bina, which is the Hey, and the Malchut, the Hey, are sort of the same, you could say. They represent where the Bina, the understanding, is the root, and the Malchut, the kingdom, is the branch. And therefore you can see that they're always equal, right? So just the Vav is where it expands into the second restriction. So it's not, don't think of them as like 1, 2, 3, 4, rather see it as 1, 2, and 3, and this is again 2. So it's like duplicated. So whatever in the Bina gets duplicated into the Malchut. And we'll also see that happening when we talk about the beating of the surrounding light with the inner light, where we'll see how that works out, that when Bina within the spiritual face purifies, then also the Malchut purifies as well, because it's a branch to a root. So I think we'll stop here and do the after party.